I've carefully noted Mr. Pistorius' calculated reasons for wanting to take Reeva, I think, to Manchester. I wanted to show her why I, Oscar, cannot go to function. I wanted to show her why I, Oscar, have to sleep. I wanted to show her why I, Oscar, cannot go to events. Why I, Oscar, are on strict diet. Those must be things that they argued about, or that she couldn't understand.
I wasn't aware of any arguments. For me, it was really a case of Mr. Pistorius wanting to show Ms. Steenkamp what his world as a professional athlete is about, why it is that you have to be very strict on yourself and professional if you want to achieve these goals that you set yourself.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions about what happened between Oscar and Reva on Valentine's Day is that it was simply a lover's quarrel, that it was a fight about cheating or breaking up that eventually just got out of hand. But what was happening between Oscar and Reva was actually far more complicated than that. In part 1 of Revelations, the video, as well as in the Resurrection and the Revelations books, we examine in detail the reality of Oscar and Reva's relationship in February 2013. And what we found was that this couple, who had only been together for 4 months, was actually fairly unhappy with each other. They were growing increasingly frustrated. There were secrets, there were arguments, and there was actually quite a bit of separation. The two had only been together for 4 months, yet the majority of the time they spent apart from each other. They were on two very specific career paths, and each were independently moving in the direction of their goals. They didn't have a lot of time to spend together. Oscar was just about to start his season abroad, which would mean that he would be away for months at a time, and that would no doubt put additional stress on this couple that was already starting to fail. Oscar didn't want to be alone again. He didn't want to lose Reeva. She was good for him, and she was good for his brand. And this is where you really get a glimpse into the person that Oscar is. He was fighting to keep Reeva because she was good for him. It had nothing to do with her well-being or what she wanted. She had the potential to make Oscar feel better about himself, to make his life and his career better, and he wasn't ready to let that go. But what was Reeva thinking at the time? Did Reeva actually believe that Oscar was good for her? Reeva had worked for years to have a successful modeling career. She abandoned her law school education to chase this dream. It wasn't just a hobby for her. This is the career path that Reeva had chosen for her life. And after years of struggling and never quite making it, constantly struggling financially, she finally had started to come into her own around 2012. She was working with a PR firm called Capacity Relations. She had gotten into the best shape of her life, and she was starting to book bigger contracts. She had booked multiple photo shoots for FHM, the popular men's magazine, and she had just filmed a reality TV show called Tropica Island of Treasure that was getting ready to air shortly after she was killed. She was excited about all of these new opportunities, and she was happy that she was finally moving in the right direction. There's something important that Nick uncovers in the Revelations book, and that's that Reeva was involved with something called Legacy Lifestyle. Legacy Lifestyle is an inner circle of elite celebrities in South Africa promoting brands. These celebrities are chosen to be brand ambassadors based off of their own personalities, not because of who they're dating, but because of who they are in their own right. Legacy Lifestyle was an important gig for Reeva because it would mean she could finally start moving away from bikini modeling and start to be recognized as a serious classic model. So where does Oscar fit into this picture? Well, he actually doesn't, and Nick and I believe this is at the very root of the motive. In the documentary titled The Model You Thought You Knew, which was created by Karen Mon, a popular South African journalist, there's a pretty stunning piece of information that's shared with the viewers. Reeva's PR team shares that Oscar was not part of their marketing plan for Reeva. In fact, they were concerned he would get in the way of her career path, and they shared that information with Reeva.
And her team were, however, worried that Reeva's blossoming relationship with Pistorius would derail those plans.
Because we had created a very solid plan around her brand and how we were going to get her out and relevant and create that currency to make her generate the revenue and get the castings, it was important that we followed that path.
We did not want her to be seen, or rather labeled, as Oscar's girlfriend. We wanted her to have her own identity.
Reva took her publicist's advice and initially described herself and Pistorius as, quote, just friends.
Reva wasn't just working to support herself, she was also working to help support her parents financially. So realistically, was Reva willing to give all of that up, all of that momentum that she had gained over the past year in her career, a career that was going to help the survival of her and her family? Was she going to give all of that up so that she could go and travel with Oscar and have a little bit of fun? Yes, he was a boyfriend that she did have feelings for. She was falling in love with him. But at the same time, she was also very unhappy at times, and they were barely getting along. He was somebody that her PR team had expressed to her could interfere with this career that meant the world to her. Oscar had an incredibly stressful job, and the stress of his job was constantly causing fights between the two of them, and he barely had time to spend with her. So realistically, was Reva going to throw everything away for a relationship that was incredibly uncertain? Both Oscar and Pete Van Zyl claim that Reva was very excited to go on these extended trips, yet there's no evidence that supports that she had planned on going. Actually, I think it's a very real possibility, one that Nick and I have heavily considered in terms of coming up with our motive and our method, that she told Oscar on February 13th that she was not going to go with him. And if she wasn't going to go on those trips, then the likelihood of their relationship continuing was not very good. How would Oscar have received that news? Well, if you look at his history in the 6 months prior to killing Reva, he had multiple incidents of fighting with people, threatening people. We know of at least 2 situations where he used his gun in public. Oscar could not handle personal rejection. It felt like death to him. If Reva had rejected Oscar's plans that night, and that rejection turned into a heated fight, a fight that turned violent, or perhaps Oscar threatened her with violence, or maybe even threatened to kill her, Reva would have fought for her life. And if Reva wanted to call a friend, or if she wanted to call the police, which we believe that she did, Oscar would have definitely stopped her.
Mr. Van Zyl, what was the position as regards the financial future, so to speak, of Mr. Pistorius during February 2030?
Due to the amazing performances of Mr. Pistorius in London at the Olympic Games and Paralympic Games, his profile was raised to global icon, sports icon status, and I think all media would agree with me that the London Olympic Games was about 2 people, and that was Mr. Usain Bolt and Mr. Oscar Pistorius. Based on this and the profile that Mr. Pistorius's image carried in the business world, a lot of opportunities and a number of opportunities came our way, where corporate companies wanted to be associated with Mr. Pistorius due to the synergy between their values and his values, and they would want to build marketing and advertising campaigns based on that.
And the financial implications, when would that have realized?
The financial implications was going to be substantial. I can easily say 5-6 times more than what it was before the London Olympic Games. During this meeting that we specifically had on the 7th of February, we also discussed the current contracts that was already put in place and that was going to be running until the end of 2017, when Mr. Pistorius would have announced his retirement from athletics. And then also some of the current sponsors we were still busy in negotiation with, where not only would Mr. Pistorius have brand ambassadorial roles until his retirement, but also post-retirement for the work and effort that is put in for these brands. Some of these contracts also not only would entail financial implications, but also share options for Mr. Pistorius in some of these companies, and also royalties that he would earn from sales of products and merchandise carrying his brand.
In February 2013, was he aware of all these contracts and opportunities, and obviously the bright financial future waiting for him?
Yes, Mr. Pistorius was very aware of that. Mr. Pistorius, I can also confirm, is a very astute businessman, and he was very aware of the role that he had to play within his brand and the financial implications that he stood to gain in the years to come.
In Pete Van Ziel's testimony, he reinforces that Oscar is a very astute businessman. Oscar is aware of his brand, and he's aware of the role that he has to play to maintain that brand. Oscar would have done anything to protect the persona and the career that he worked so hard for and lied for to create. It wasn't acceptable to Oscar to be seen by the public as anything other than the Blade Runner. He certainly couldn't let the world see him as a bully on stumps. Through our Resurrection and Revelations books, as well as through these videos, Nick and I have outlined why we believe Oscar took Reva's life. We've discussed the why in terms of his motive, but we haven't yet talked about why in a much broader sense. The why of how Oscar came to be this person who was willing to kill another human being, somebody he cared about. How does anybody become a killer? In episode 8, we'll discuss that. We'll talk about Oscar's lifelong deception to be something he wasn't, and how that radically changed him and everybody else around him. The narrative of our recently released book, Fugitive, deals with this topic. It interrogates Oscar's psychology and his intentionality.